That's a good ass
All right,
job.
cool. So yeah, so today we got my guy Zay on. We are gonna be talking about his background in chemical engineering, so we can help y'all identify if it's something that y'all want to go down. So Zay, can you tell us a little bit about your background and what got you interested in chemical engineering?
Yeah, for sure, man. So I'm originally from down in Louisiana, kind of down here in that Gulf Coast area. It's very dominated by the oil refineries, chemical plants. Growing up, a lot of family worked in chemical plants as operators, stuff like that. So, going through school, they had that exposure to see that, okay, we're operators, we make good money, especially to say you don't need a college degree, but we see the engineers and they come in after 4 years of college and they go on and do, this, that, and other. So my background went to LSU, graduated with chemical engineering, did a couple internships while I was in school. We could talk a little bit more about that later. But yeah, graduated in 2020, started working for Chevron. We have a site down here real close to home. And yeah, so that's what I've been doing since late 2020. It's been good.
All right, that's what's up. So you mentioned your educational path at LSU. What's
Mhm.
the curriculum like to going down the chemical engineering path?
Yeah, man, it's pretty straightforward. I would say, like we're talking about, the Gulf Coast is very focused on that, the refining and chemical production portions of chemical engineering.
That's a good
So a
ass
lot of
job.
the colleges down here they have a very streamlined approach to their programs and getting people in and out, placed in jobs to keep more people coming in. So typically, you come in your first years, all prereqs, math, science, English, all your basics. Starting your sophomore year, you start getting introduced to that chemical engineering specific curriculum. So you're going to be taking, you know, heat and mass, energy balance classes. You're going to be taking your organic chemistries, a little more of your upper level chemical chemistry classes, math classes. You're going to take some calculus, physics, but yeah, even that year is still going to be pretty. It's going to be a little rougher, but it's not too bad. The last two ones is where they get folks. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. Those last 2 years are rough, but the advice I've always gotten and the advice I give now is, and you go to school, it's gonna be rough, but once you graduate, school will be the hardest thing you've done for the most part.
Okay, so
It's
the rigorousness of school is really what people need to look out for if chemical engineering is a path they want to go down.
Yeah, that's gonna be the main roadblock in my opinion, especially if you're located in the U.S. You're looking to go into the larger, more traditional job fields of the pharmaceuticals, the oil and gas, chemical, energy sectors. Those always hiring chemical engineers. So it's not like there's a shortage of jobs for you as long as you graduate and you're qualified. A little experience with internships or co-ops help, but there is nothing I've done in my day-to-day role that compares to the difficulty, or at least or how challenging school was for me.
Oh wow! Is the challenge from the school? Is it mostly in the math or in the chemistry and biology components of it?
So the with most engineering degrees, right, not just chemical, we're going to school more to learn and prove that we're able to solve problems. So I mean, once you get into a plant setting or an office setting, you're gonna get a wealth of information. So typically, if you're trying to solve those same problems, you have way more information to work with, because those companies, it's in their best interest to not have the problems at all. So they're going to have a lot of information around their processes that makes it a lot more easy to troubleshoot, to optimize, all the things they're paying us to do. At school, it's different. They're trying to force you to develop your critical thinking skills, to prove that you understand the concept. So they're going to give you as little information as possible.
That makes sense.
All right.
That makes a lot of sense.
So they're trying to force you to think critically and make smart assumptions and work from your core principles to get to an answer. And it's you hear about it a lot when you ask people that are currently in it or who have done it. It's a lot of times, man, you're not getting the right answer, but it's not necessarily the right answer that you're being judged on. It's more of your thought process.
More so the thought process. That's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
That makes sense. So coming out of school, then coming into the actual career field, what was that like?
Oh man. So like I said, LSU does a really good job with getting their students experience before they walk out the door.
Through internship or just like hands-on experience?
So, I mean, there's lab experience, there's internship experience, there's co-op experience, which is essentially like a longer internship. Well, like I said, for most large universities with large engineering programs, they are judged based on how many of their students are successful after finishing their program, right? So they want you to be as successful as possible.
Yeah, so they only want to produce engineers that's actually going to go into the field and do things.
Right. So, I mean, when you talk about experience in a lab setting, well, that's typically what your master's, PhD level students are going to do for the rest of their life, right? They're going to be, once you get up that high and that specialized in the field, you're past what companies typically look for in a entry level process engineer. Right, you're more so valued based on that extreme level of knowledge you have in your niche. So those levels of education are working on more of cutting edge stuff. Hey, how can we make new things? How can we drive innovation? With your bachelor's, you're more looking, so how can I make this run safer, more efficiently? How can I make more money on this? You know, all of those questions where you're in the field, you're looking at the process from a ground level.
That makes sense. You just mentioned niche not too long ago. How many different, you mentioned it earlier too, when you're talking about there's no shortage of jobs in pharmaceutical and this field, that field. What is the niche that you would say most chemical engineers are looking to get into?
It depends. A lot of it's like geographical, man. Because when you're looking at the West Coast, right, you've got Silicon Valley over there, and the semiconductor industry, chemical engineers work there. You have engineers. You do still have some, refineries and chemical plants out there, so they'll work there. That's kind of where you can think of the chemical engineer as like one of the premier engineers in that oil and gas and chemical space. When you're looking more at the semiconductor kind of field, you're more of playing the supporting cast. And that can show in your salary as well, right? Right. So the people who really need you are going to pay a premium for the same services, right? And pharmaceuticals are similar, but in my experience, which is limited with people who have gone into that field, the masters and the PhDs command a premium there, where in oil and gas, the bachelors really command a premium because they need more and more people on the ground in all their sites, trying to make sure that they're running as efficiently, safely, and making as much money as possible.
So it will probably make the most sense for somebody straight out of college to go somewhere with an oil.
I would say if you don't have any inhibitions about it, because I mean, it's, depending on where you are, what your beliefs are, it can be controversial. But what I will say that I've been getting more and more exposure to lately is the renewable fields. A lot of these big integrated oil companies or energy companies, really, they've probably been one of the first to note how trends are going to shift in the future, and really starting now. And they have been buying companies. They've been starting their own branches of their companies focused on developing those renewable solutions. So you got things like your biodiesels. You got places focused on developing hydrogen solutions. All of those places need the same amount of chemical engineers, and they pay just as well. So
Oh, nice.
if you are someone who really believes in that path, that's probably your best shot as far as, sticking to your beliefs, still getting paid well in chemical engineering, and still being able to get a really good relevant experience that allows you to move up the ladder at the same rate as any other premier position.
Yeah. Speaking of moving up the ladder, it's been a lot of talk on the internet. I don't know if you noticed, but like I think it's because of the political and the presidential campaign. They throwing like this DEI stuff like around a lot
Yeah,
right
man.
now. So like,
Yeah.
it's getting kind of silly. It's like it's ridiculous because in my experience, that doesn't really exist because usually it's us that's usually let go first, especially if we incompetent at the job. So the thought that somebody incompetent is just going to be there just because the company got to meet a quota is laughable. So in your experience, what's it like for like people that look like us working in chemical engineering?
So I'll say, because, at LSU, even if you want to get down to the university level, which is really where you're going to start, you're not going to have as many students that look like you. Just from an awareness level, getting through your prereqs, by the time you're in your junior year, it's going to be a handful of you. You got HBCUs that have programs that have been extremely successful. I went to LSU, so I'm talking from my experience. But I do know from looking at my company, seeing where some of my friends work, they do have those HBCU grads getting the same job offers, opportunities, and coming in with very similar competence levels. So there's no difference there. So that's also a good option for folks to look at. But like I said, starting from that major chemical engineering program standpoint, there's not going to be that many of you there. By the time you're really trying to start hunting your job down, it's not that many. And the ones that are there, you still got to be qualified for a job, right? When you're looking at trying to get a job, there's so many students that are applying for these jobs. You have to have some kind of way to whittle down numbers, right? The first thing is your GPA. So if your GPA isn't up to standard, you're not getting through the computer system. From there, you've got, your career fair or your job posting, however you're coming into contact with this job. You have to find a way to grab someone's attention. And I think that is probably the only step in the process where someone might say, oh, okay, well, we're looking at our team and we have no one that looks like this person or comes from this background or has this sexual orientation. DEI isn't just a race thing. And that's what I've been seeing a lot online because that's what's most visible, right? But it's your sexual orientation, it's your background, what country your family's from. Are you first generation college student, or have you everybody since your great grandpa went to college? That's all part of having that diversity of thought, which is the point of DEI. It's not that I'm trying to fill a bunch of boxes just so that Twitter doesn't come after me.
Exactly.
Right. It's that I see value in having a team of qualified, competent people from diverse backgrounds, because diverse backgrounds drive diverse ideas, and diverse ideas give you the best rate of growth.
Yeah, exactly. That's probably the best definition I've heard of DEI. Yeah.
Yeah. So, like I said, not many people walk through the door without being qualified and competent.
Exactly.
And if you start hitting that bottom line, this is America, is capitalism.
Yeah,
you hit that bottom line and you out the door, man.
Yeah, I believe it, man. I definitely believe it. So you said there's not a whole lot of people, like even coming through school, there's just not a whole lot of people that look like us in those classrooms. Why do you think that is?
Man, it's something that I've been working with folks at work on too. But honestly, it seems, well, number one, which is a good thing in a way, people get attracted to kind of the flavor of the day. And we're kind of seeing that with all the other stuff on Twitter about the big tech company layoffs, right? Is that you've got everyone flooding to the tech industry
Yeah.
because it's, you hear about the huge salary so quick and you got all the benefits and stuff like that. And eventually that slows down. So it's a good thing that you're aware of it, you're going for it, you're making that move. But we tend to see, part of it is we tend to see a lot of students flock to that one area. So where we might have had 10% of a class be Black, or really probably 20% just be minority in general, we're starting to see it look like 5% now. And we see everyone more concentrated in those computer science, computer engineering classes. On the other side of it, it's actually getting to the point of being qualified. You get to school, and I've always said, when I first got to LSU, I didn't even know what an engineer did. All right, like I knew I was good at math. My best science was chemistry. I didn't want to be a doctor because I don't like seeing people's insides.
Yeah.
I didn't want to be a lawyer because I didn't want to read all day. So to me, I was like, man, the lifestyle I want to live, I got to make a certain amount of money. This is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna be an engineer. And I got lucky as I went through and as I did the right things, I was able to get more exposure and figure out what engineers did, and I liked it. But most people that look like us live that same scenario and aren't necessarily doing everything they need to do because they don't know what they need to do.
Yeah, that's a big part of the reason why I wanted to start this channel, so I can expose people to different type of career fields other than the flavor of the day, so they can get a background and a grasp on what it takes to actually make it in that career field.
No, absolutely, man. It's great that you're doing it. Like I said, like you get on campus as a freshman and you can kind of see the difference immediately. Some kids are like, okay, I'm joining my engineering clubs. I'm trying to get on like a freshman leadership team, immediately getting on campus trying to distinguish themselves from their peers. So when that first career fair comes around and some companies will have a small quota like, hey, we're going to give an internship to a couple freshmen. The freshmen that get them are the ones that are different from the rest, the ones that look the most promising. Your first year isn't that difficult, so your GPA, I mean, it's probably going to look pretty good. So it's that leadership experience tends to really set people apart and set them up for really good opportunities. And once you get your first internships, the other ones are way easier to get.
Yeah. So did you end up getting any internships?
No, I didn't get an internship until the summer after my sophomore year.
Okay.
My freshman year, I didn't get one. Sophomore year, I got one at a smaller, well, I don't want to say a smaller company. It was a soul refining company. It wasn't an integrated company. So, and when I say integrated, essentially what I'm saying is you've got everything from getting oil out the ground, processing it, selling it, and then taking your side streams and making all other kinds of products to sell. You're everything from sourcing it to selling it. You do everything. That's what I mean by integrated. So that's your Shells, your Exxons, your Chevrons, your really big companies that everyone knows.
Yeah, that makes sense. So can you kind of describe like what your current role is and what your day-to-day is like? And like what?
Oh, yeah.
I didn't even ask you what niche of chemical engineering are you working in?
So I'm working in the chemicals industry. So the plant I work at is a chemical plant. I am a process engineer at that plant. Typically, like I said, what that means is my job is essentially to make things, well, the easiest way to think about it is my job is to make things safer and make the company more money. So, right, there's a bunch of different ways you can do that. You can make it cheaper to make things. You can make the products themselves better so that you sell them for more, or you can get more of your bulk product out of your concentrated product. You can improve the yield you get out of your materials, reduce the energy it costs to make the products, right? So there's a bunch of different levers you can pull to try to accomplish that. But the two main goals are making sure we're doing things the right way, safely, and finding ways to improve the economics of our process.
Yeah, that sounds very interesting. I think anybody that would want to work in chemical engineering, I think process engineering might be something that a lot of people would want to do, especially if it's not like in an oil rig. I'm sure they got process engineers in the oil
Everywhere.
side too, but I just, because that seems more like project management to me in a sense.
Yeah, so I mean, so that entry level role is typically either going to be designs engineering or process engineering for a chemical engineer. They're called different things at different companies, but the core of the jobs are the same. So typically in any production based facility, so whether it's pharmaceutical production, producing oil, producing chemicals, producing food, semiconductors, I mean, almost anything that gets produced at scale, you're going to have a process engineer. And that's part of why the chemical engineering field has been so robust for so long, is that everywhere needs at least some. On the design side, similar. Something breaks, you got to design something to replace it. You have an opportunity to make something new, somebody has to design it to go get those quotes, put together the packages, make sure everything is in compliance, things like that. That's kind of what the design side does. So, and again, that's everywhere. So designs can be chemical or mechanical, depending on like the industry. Like automotive design is definitely going to be a mechanically driven thing, right? But you're going to have the fuel side of automotive is going to be chemical, right? So there's a little nuance there on the design side. For process, you're typically looking at chemical.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. So day to day, a process engineer is going to have some section or the whole plant that they're working at that they're responsible for overseeing. Typically that involves making sure your product quality is up to par, making sure your energy expenditure is normal or improving. And then, like, again, the safety aspect, making sure that we're not having any process related incidents.
No, yeah, that all makes sense. That all makes sense. You mentioned lifestyle a little bit earlier, so I kind of want to jump into like what's the lifestyle of a chemical engineer. I'm gonna talk about the money. Like, can you describe your salary trajectory from when you started to like where you are now?
Yeah, man. So I'll say that chemicals, if I had to rank from what I know, the potential salaries out of school based on the industry, I would say your oil rigs, your drilling operations, basically wherever you're finding and extracting oil, are going to have the largest potential salaries. However, that's a very cyclical thing. Sometimes the oil price is up, sometimes the oil price is down, and the jobs definitely move with that. After that, I would say your oil refineries and your chemical plants are kind of lumped in a similar range. That range is typically going to be anywhere from 70 to 110,000 coming out.
And that's fresh out of college?
Yeah. First year. So typically your 70 to 80 range is going to be for smaller companies, right? A company can only pay you what they can pay you, right?
Yeah.
So your smaller companies, your more specialized companies, you're going to get kind of the lower end of that range. At your bigger, and I keep saying this, the integrated companies, you're going to get the most competitive rates that you can get. So that's going to really, to me, is like 90 to 110 is the range that you should be looking for at those companies. So yeah,
that's really good right out of college, especially for something that's like not in tech, because like tech is like tech. They basically lure people in because of salaries, crazy starting salaries. But everywhere ain't tech, but everywhere also every other career field does pay good though. Like 90 to 110 coming straight out of college is nothing to sneeze at.
Yep. And what I will say as well is compared to most jobs, your yearly raises, your bonuses are going to be extremely competitive as well, right? So that 90 to 110 is including your bonus, your sign-on bonus, performance-based bonus, things like that. That's all extra on top of your base salary. And then you've got performance-based raises that typically, like I said, from my experience, are going to be at minimum in whatever the rate of inflation is, plus a little bit. And then you're going to have your performance on top of that.
Okay. So after what kind of ranges can people assume to get like after they've been in for a while?
So I'll say 5 years. I want to say is typically when a person is no longer considered a new hire or an inexperienced hire. Once you have 5 years in a given industry, you're seen with the minimum level experience to come in and be impactful quickly, right? So that 5 year mark is typically where people see, and I don't want to kind of put numbers on other companies that I don't have experience with, but the equivalent of like a second promotion. Right. So you get a yearly raise, your promotions are going to be bigger than your typical raise. But that 5th year, once you're no longer in experience, you typically have that second promotion by then. I would expect to be around the 140 to 160 thousand range.
Yeah, that's what's up. That's what's up. And you said earlier, you said people with masters and PhDs, they command a significant a lot. So like what's the ranges if somebody wanted to look into you stepping it up and furthering their education and grabbing one of those masters or PhD spots?
Yeah, the masters are tricky because you're not quite a PhD, like you're not quite that, absolute expert, but you're also more qualified than a bachelor's. So I've seen a lot of masters present in like pharmaceuticals and semiconductors. I don't see as many in oil and gas or chemical. Typically we see a lot of PhDs when it comes to the very chemical, like chemistry focused roles that you can get. I do know that there are some of like the more niche things like simulation software development for oil and gas and refining and chemical processes. I've seen masters go into that, but those opportunities are a little more limited. So it's not the easiest thing to get into. And PhDs are very much dependent on their research topic as well. So if you research the right thing, you might have people coming knocking on your door. Hey, we got an opportunity for you. Hey, we got a job for you. If you, a little too early or a little too late, that might make it a little more difficult to find that spot at those types of companies.
No, yeah, that makes sense for sure. That makes sense.
Yeah. So, but yeah, they do command somewhat of a premium. There's a guy on Reddit who does this salary report across the industry. He slices the data up a bunch of different ways, but typically speaking, the premium in chemical engineering for your advanced degrees aren't as pronounced in your first 5 years coming out of school. You'll make similar amounts. once you start getting to the point of distinguishing yourself as a PhD or master's inside the company, like internally, that's where that trajectory completely shifts. And you're talking about making, upper level supervisory management types of salaries.
Yeah,
at these
that makes
large
sense for
companies.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what the skills that you develop from chemical engineering, is it safe to say that this is the type of job where you develop such strong skills that you can take those skills and work for yourself, like consulting or building
Yep.
your own type
So
of business?
consulting is a huge portion of chemical engineering. I mean, most plants in general aren't doing everything on the inside of that plant themselves. They're subcontracting things out constantly. So I would say, I mean, you've got consultant firms that are super focused on designing very specific equipment, that are focused on just solely project management. You got consultant firms, I mean, based on just treating wastewater. Anything that you can think of, any subsection of chemical engineering that's in a plant anywhere in any industry, there's probably a market for contracting and starting your own business focused on that. What I will say, the typical path for consulting that I've seen involves at least the founders starting and building up their competencies at these companies first.
Yeah,
Because
I think that's what most in any career, you got to kind of work somewhere first so you can learn the industry before you can go do your own thing.
So they learn the industry, they get a lot of experience with it in their niche typically, and they go out and they start their own thing, and then they build up their clientele. But it's a very common thing to see in chemical engineering, and really in all forms of engineering.
Yeah, that makes sense, man. I think that's a good place to leave off, man. We touched on a lot of different topics, how to get in, how to the trajectory, the career trajectory, and everything. I think anybody that's interested in chemical engineering, I think this interview will be extremely helpful for them. But I got one last question for anybody that is interested in chemical engineering. What's some advice you would give them if they maybe they in high school or maybe they looking to completely change careers from something that they're doing? Like, what would you tell them to do?
Yeah, man. Honestly, there's a bunch of things I could say that may or may not help you in your situation, but the best thing I could tell you is just stay focused and get through it, man. Because the other side of it is so rewarding, from a lifestyle perspective, monetarily, also from a workload perspective, from what you would expect to work for that kind of money. It's, like I said, the hardest thing you're going to do is the schooling. So if you're in it, if you get in it and it's rough, you feeling like you could just go back and do what you was doing before, don't let the difficulty stop you, because it's difficult for everybody. Every engineer that there ever was struggled in school. That's the point. If you're not struggling, then you're not learning. So
yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, don't let that struggle stop you.
For sure, man. Well, Zay, man, I definitely appreciate you. Thanks for doing this, man. Look forward to getting people out there interested in chemical engineering, man. I hope this helps them. I think it will, man. But like I said, I appreciate you, man.
Hey, no problem. Appreciate you having me on.
All right, man. Take it easy, bro.
All right, bro. Later.